Good afternoon and welcome to NYFP. This afternoon I'm joined by Bobby Heller of OnPoint Executions. Hi Bobby, thanks for joining me today.
Hi, good morning, Remy.
We're at the end of a very busy week. We had earnings, mixed economic data, Bernanke speaking, and finally the bank stress test results out from the Eurozone. But what do you think has been the most important development and what are you paying attention to?
Well, I think one of the more exciting developments this week was Bernanke or somebody from the Fed telling us that they'd provide more stimulus, and then Bernanke the next day correcting himself, or for exactly what he meant by that. But today, especially the big driving force seems to be the economic data pointing out consumer sentiment. That the consumers here just aren't on board with this great economy that everybody seems to be saying is happening. We're watching the stock market after a couple of rough weeks earlier this year, continue to keep going higher, and frankly, I think people are looking and saying, like, how can that happen? I mean, look at here, the jobs data last week. I think there's some jobs number today. The consumer sentiment. It all looks like what's happened. And, people are having a hard time putting their head around that news with a rising stock market, and I think that's got some big focus in the last few days.
Well, Bobby, looking ahead to next week as well as the beginning of August, we obviously have the U.S. debt ceiling issue. How do you see that playing out in the marketplace in the next few weeks?
I think, and maybe it's wishful thinking, I hope it doesn't come down to the last hour with any real threat of shutting down any government services, especially like writing checks for Social Security, writing checks for Medicare, Medicaid, and unemployment, all that stuff. I think it's getting a little too political in Congress right now. With in the past, we used to have these debt ceilings, and they'd think about it for a few minutes, say how far they want to raise it, and take a quick vote. Now it's become big ideological posturing. With it seems like mostly Republicans right now standing in the way, that they want to push their agenda of how to do things rather than just voting for it and then get back to work. So right now they're not working on any real changes on things that they should be working on, and they're not getting the debt deal done either. So they're sort of wasting everybody's time and going nowhere. So I think that's going to be the real driving force in the next few weeks. Hopefully only a day or so, if they can get it done. But I don't really see that happening.
Okay, Bobby, well, last but not least, before we wrap it up, we've covered a lot of the fundamentals, but next week I'm sure investors will be paying attention to earnings. What is your take on the earnings season so far?
Well, it's interesting because we've seen a couple of banks, J.P. Morgan and Citibank, they've come out and it seems they're still printing money. And the only other real company, a non-financial that I could think of as doing that is Apple. Steve Jobs is printing money. But I haven't heard any new Apple inventions in the last few weeks. And when these when the manufacturing firms come out, I think they're going to see that their profits are not as strong as they've been in the past couple of quarters, because of some of these things that were pointed out by the consumer sentiment numbers today. I think their sales are going to be lower, and while they still may be positive earnings, I think people are going to have to take a real hard look after these earnings come out to say, what part of the curve are we in the economic cycle? We can't keep getting higher profits on lower sales. So it'll be interesting to see some of these companies, if they're willing to take the money that they have stuffed in the bank or a paper sack somewhere and get out there and start, manufacturing again, or lending money in terms of financials. And I'll also just, as a side note, I don't think they're waiting around to see what the government attitudes or government rules are going to have on their business. I think what they're waiting for is people to get out there and spend money again.
Okay, Bobby, as always, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for weighing in on all these topics.
Okay, it's a pleasure being here.